today. How do you find available tennis courts? Because I've taken up tennis due to the pandemic, right? The only thing we can really do outside, golf or tennis, and tennis courts are always booked. What time of the day should I be going?
Probably like early as possible. I obviously don't go early as possible. My wife does. The thing is that I'm lucky to have tennis courts within my community, and they're mostly not so young and they don't play so much. So usually you can always find one court available. But I agree, the other courts around us, they're always fully booked because it's one of the safer activities you can do outside because people are, opposite the net, so there's plenty of space in between them. So yeah, I understand. And the weather, obviously, if it's not raining, but it's pretty good for tennis these days. So yes, there are a lot of people out there playing tennis, and I try to get out there when possible. And usually, as I mentioned, I find one available. But again, I don't play every day, so usually it's okay.
Well, maybe we'll earn your trust through this entire conversation that you'll tell us where these secret, always available tennis courts are.
Well, I'm a Potomac, Maryland resident, and that should give it away. Yeah, but I need to first apologize to everybody because I know you were hanging in there for at least 10 minutes waiting for the magic to happen. Unfortunately, my company's firewalls are pretty radical, and I couldn't get the audio up and working, and that's why it took so long. Yeah, so I assume we want to talk real estate today.
Yes, yeah, and I think the conversation will be worth the wait. So Chris, just so for people who don't know you who are joining today, can you give a little background on your career progression at Volkswagen?
Yeah, so everything has been always very unconventional, to put it that way. I'm not a person who ever really planned his career or his path. So when I left university, I was always thinking of either marketing, because that was my major, or investment banking, and then I liked always marketing more. But then I started out actually with a finance internship, which should have been like a 2-year program in Brazil, which again was not really on my scope, like to go all the way down to Brazil. But my dad convinced me that's a great place to start because down there at VW, there's a joint venture with Ford, and Ford Finance is, top notch, whatever. So I started down in Brazil. Obviously, I love Brazil. I love São Paulo, fantastic place, fantastic people. So out of the 2 years, at the end, it was about 10 years that I spent down there. And the main reason leaving was the fact that I had a family, and the big disadvantage of São Paulo and Brazil is the violence. So I didn't want to have my kids grow up in a city where they can't even, walk freely on the street without risks of kidnapping, assault, etc. But coming back to the career path, so I started out in finance and did, pricing and stuff like that in car finance. Moved then over to product controlling, and that's probably one of the areas which helped me a lot to think more in a group world than just in a silo world, because if you just do, let's say, pricing, whatever, you just get the numbers, you figure out what your return supposed to be, and then you put in the price on top to make it more simple. Obviously, it's more difficult than that, but the product controller is a very different activity because you deal with, engineering, design, developing the car, developing the looks of the car. You deal with the manufacturing to get the car produced, etc. You have to bring in all these numbers to see if it's a viable project or not. So this project thinking was probably which helped me a lot later in my career because of, as I mentioned, working with different teams with different backgrounds, different inputs to the overall project. So then leaving that type of the business, moving over to after sales, that was great because it took me around the world a bit, because we were exporting a lot in those days to the US, we were exporting to Europe, we were exporting to China, South Africa, so all fantastic places to visit because they were my customers. And as I mentioned, getting my family kicked off and my kids were born, we got the opportunity to get transferred over back to Europe, Germany, and we spent about 4 years in the center of Germany around Cologne, Düsseldorf, if you have some knowledge of Germany, so it's like the center, where I was running a region. And running the region and logistics after sales meant to have, you know, a lot of also facility responsibilities, because that's where we kept our parts in business. So that's where I got also in touch of obviously keeping up that facility. I always liked nice environments, nice working environments and things like that. So I started, you know, doing some improvement projects to that facility, and got into another project where I met my next boss, who was the person who was then transferred over to the US. And going then to the US, one of my big projects was the transfer of the Auburn Hills headquarters to Herndon. And that was basically my first step into the real estate world. And then when the person who had run real estate retired, they offered me the job.
So that must have been a really huge and maybe slightly scary undertaking to go from all these different roles and then suddenly not only be moving a headquarters, which we all know is a big deal, but moving a headquarters from Michigan to Virginia, which obviously entails, I'm sure you're working with every group, right?
Yeah, and that was really where you really learn about dynamics and what's important to people, which I wouldn't thought of, like, you know, how can that be so important to you? But people really got very personal about their workspace. I was always a bit more under the impression, like, you know, the workspace is what you get from your boss, which is like the desk, the chair, whatever, you know, computer stuff, but you don't get to really pick and choose colors or say what you like or dislike, because, you know, it's not yours, it's the company's assets, and, you know, why you're so interested in these types of things. So that was a bit of a learning process to deal with these dynamics. And also what made it a bit more complex is the fact that we are a multiple brand company. So when you think you understand how the VW people think, it's again very different from how the Audi people think, how the you know, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and the other people think, right? So in our company, you have to deal with all these different expectations when you do a project. And if you do a specific Lamborghini project or a specific Audi project, then obviously you only deal, you know, with that one group. But with the headquarters, it was dealing like with many more groups to get them, you know, to agree to how the building could look and feel, because obviously you didn't want to go from one floor to the next floor. And, you know, it's a completely different environment and different cost behind that build out, right? It should all be more or less the same. And then of course you can do some branding, where just with graphics on the wall and then some color touches, because obviously every brand has their brand color, then you can, you know, differentiate a bit the different areas. But again, it was not that I wanted to really go into real estate. It was the fact that that person who ran the real estate department retired. And as they said, you know, you did this big Herndon move. So, you know, would you be interested in real estate? And I thought, you know, yes, I did the Herndon move, but, you know, how much real estate are we talking? And then he showed me, the HR representative showed me the portfolio. And I thought, like, oh my God, you know, this is all our footprint in the US. And he said, yeah, this is what we have. And then you see like warehouses, port operations, design studios, testing facilities, retail offices, and, you know, anything you can imagine. And I thought, like, wow, you know, this is quite different from what I expected. So I said, okay, you know, why not? You know, I did always something different every couple of years, so why not spend a couple of years in real estate? But whoever worked in real estate knows that this is really a very different job from any other job. And if you like it, like I do, then, you know, you don't think like, oh, why don't I go back to sales? Or why don't I go back to, you know, marketing, whatever. Actually, you like real estate and you prefer to stay in real estate.
So you had a, you know, like you mentioned, like a very a varied background, right? So you had finance experience, and then you had this like with costing, and then you had this experience understanding if projects were viable or not, and, you know, helping make those decisions. It all, you know, has been able to help you in this role. But when you look at your role, and I think about the people who may be listening today who might be interested in a role like yours, are there characteristics that you think make somebody, you know, successful in your role? And or when we look back at your experience, so obviously everybody's not going to have experience of working, you know, for a large organization like Volkswagen, perhaps, where they could work in so many different areas. But are there things you did, like I know you have an MBA, are there things you did that you find that have really helped you succeed in this position?
Well, I think what always makes you succeed and continue is the satisfaction of your client, right? So if you manage to have, you know, happy clients, then they obviously recommend you, and, you know, your job continues and you get more and more and more things to do, and, you know, the thing grows. So I think, you know, with the first project, and, you know, I like good looking things, let's put it that way. I don't like boring and unattractive stuff. So I think that, you know, when the customers get excited about what we deliver, that helps a lot. So I think that, you know, you need to understand what your customer knows, and you need to know, like, to, you know, make a bit of a wow afterwards. You need to know how to obviously understand the customer, but also how to then transmit that what he needs into the group which has to execute the project, so that the architects design to, you know, what the expectations are, but also to, you know, deal with the general contractors and the facility guys and everybody else to, you know, execute the project and maintain whatever you produced, you know, long term, to, you know, keep it up to, you know, get looks, get finishes, you know, need attention. So again, it's this group thinking, you know, working with the different entities, which can be very different, because obviously, you know, between architects and general contractors, engineers, etc., these are all different backgrounds, different needs when they ask you things. And, you know, you need to be able to be, you know, flexible on the one hand, but also be able to, you know, put it together and keep it together to the finish line, right? And make sure that the whole project doesn't fall apart. But in terms of like studying, because I'm now fortunate to have somebody working with me, and she has 2 majors in real estate, which I think is fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't even have known until recently that you could even study real estate. So she's probably better prepared for the job than I am, because I never studied anything related to real estate. But do I miss anything? Like, should I have studied real estate? I think you don't have to study real estate. I think obviously you should be, you know, understanding numbers, so that, you know when the budget gets, you know, tight and you risk of going over budget. So you need to, you know, have a bit of a sense of numbers and what things cost. But otherwise, I think it's a lot of common sense.
To me, it sounds like a couple of the traits that, you know, based on your bio and what we've been talking about here, it really seems like you're somebody who really loves to learn and grow, right? You've been in all of these different areas, and it sounds like, you know, with these different kinds of real estate projects you might be working on, you might constantly be learning, whether it's from, you know, your teammate or whether it's from one of your service providers. And also, it sounds like you're very curious. I feel like that.
Yeah, I think one of our big challenges is always that, you know, we have to think, you know, ahead, at least 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, right? Because, you know, we're signing up for leases for, you know, at least 5 years and longer, and we build out spaces for at least these 5 years or longer. And you don't want to have people come in, day one and say, okay, this is more or less what I expected. And in year 2 and 3, they say, oh my God, this is already all dated. And, other groups have much cooler stuff than we have. And, the Apples or Googles or whatever built out. So I think, obviously, one of the things which we need to have is the vision and the, always looking in front and above the horizon to be sure that what we build out and do is good for the long term and not just for today and tomorrow. And that's why also I like to travel, and I think it's important to go out and be on the street, see what people like, what people do, how they use stuff. Always interested in seeing other people's new workplaces to see, what did they learn, what can I benefit from their workout, etc. Because then you can, avoid mistakes on your own behalf, in your next project. So I think real estate people really need to have, a much broader vision and really much more radar, 5-7 years ahead. Because also, many people say like COVID, should we shut down on the offices? Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Based on today, it seems like everybody claims they work from home, fantastic, everything is fine, productivity is still at 90%, whatever. Why do we need offices, right? But, this is today's scenario, which wasn't planned. Nobody planned for this. And this is, like the lucky execution of a fantastic plan. We were forced to go home. We were forced to be at home. And I think most people want to go back to the office. And I think that once they're back in the office, they will enjoy their offices. And, maybe they start at 50%, 70%, 90%. But people will always or should always have offices, to be, recharged, rebranded, re-excited. And I think this whole culture is so important because otherwise, what difference is who you work for? If you're at home, isolated, whatever, you could work for anybody,
Yeah, I always think about that, like with culture, especially in space and how tied they are together. Like, how can you really live your culture if you don't live in your culture?
Yep. Yeah, that's why I think that, short term, sure, everybody can plan to shut down offices, but in 2, 3, 5 years, they will all be probably thinking like, oh my God, that was maybe not the best decision because, everybody wants to come back and we are growing and business is great, but I don't have the space to accommodate everybody, right?
Exactly. So what does your reentry program look like?
Well, we are in the car business, and thank God there are many people out there buying cars, which is great. So the dealers, everybody's working, and so we have to support them. So all the support functions have to be open and be running. Our factory in Chattanooga is open since weeks again, and the warehouses were never shut down. And we have technical offices, etc., who have to continue developing, testing things for the future products. The only offices which are basically closed are our large traditional offices like the headquarters and the other brand offices. And our plan is no earlier than January 1st to return. And I hope that stands. I'd like to go back, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're hearing that a lot. And I think it kind of goes back to your comment earlier about how important it is to be curious, but also to like learn from others and see what other people are doing. Have you found CoreNet to be helpful with that? I know you joined in
absolutely.
2018.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about CoreNet, I mean, I'm with CoreNet now since 2 years. I went to the Tech Symposium, which is like, I don't know, January 18, I guess. And that's where got in touch with CoreNet, and then a very nice lady convinced me to continue. And now I'm with the end user dinners with Cheryl, and we have these virtual dinners. Usually we'd have them in person, obviously now they're virtual. But in these dinners, the great thing is, maybe also a bit outside these dinners, but to meet with colleagues in the field and to discuss, learn, and have a great exchange of ideas. And sometimes we have also facilitators come in to tell us about some projects and things. So it's a great tool to really get access to many things you would otherwise not have, because you don't Google, you know, real estate all the time. It's much easier if you just have, you know, 10, 12 people from, you know, the real estate community, and you just say, guys, you know, how do you do about COVID-19, or what's your strategy with this and the strategy with that? So I think it's a great community, and I totally recommend to be part of it.
And as we finish up here, one last question for you, Chris. So you've obviously had a really interesting and amazing career, and, you know, are with, you know, one of the, you know, a really, really amazing company in our region. What advice would you give to somebody who is interested, whether they're going to school for it or just interested in maybe moving into an CRE position? What advice would you give them?
But the thing is, what I feel, and as I mentioned before, that real estate is really very different. I mean, it has a lot of components. If you think like marketing, finance, etc., it's all part of it, project management, etc. But it's a very different field, I think, from the other one. So I think that probably if you enter real estate, you have to be ready to continue and stay in real estate. I don't think after many years in real estate, it's an easy area to go out and to go back into some traditional job. So it's not something probably where I'd say like, hey, you know, let's try out 2 or 3 years real estate and then I go back to HR or whatever. That's probably difficult. So I think that you have to be really clear about what you want to do. Not that I want to discourage people from going into real estate. I mean, again, real estate is a fantastic world because it has so many different facets of so many different things. It's creative and then human, you know, because you interact with all these groups of people. So it's a great environment, a great place to work. But as I say, like in my case, you know, I'm here now 11 plus years. Would I go back into after sales or back into, you know, the traditional finance role? I don't know. I think that would be very small and very boring. So I would rather stay in real estate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just like kind of explained it perfectly. It's just one of those industries where you touch so many things, but it goes back to what you were saying about the headquarters move. Like, you're so influential over the user experience that every employee is going to have at your organization.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, and especially in our case, you know, with all these different brands, you know, there's so many different expectations to meet and to combine and, you know, make sure everybody's happy. But it works. It worked very well.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I've seen a few comments. Everybody seems really excited that they got to hear from you and hear what BW's been up to. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next Friday at 9:30 at CoreNet Café.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day. Good weekend.